Morning, everyone. Today is a Wednesday morning here in Champaign-Urbana, and we have some fantastic guests to talk about ensembles and organizations who are working with singers and musicians with special needs. Our guests are, and I'm going the way my screen is set up here right in front of me. First of all, my co-host is Dr. Beth Peterson, sitting right by me from UOI, Associate Director of BIND. And we have Leanne Ryan, who is Artistic Director of the Newfoundland Deaf Choir. And we have Todd Edmonds, who's joining us from Joyful Noise, from New Jersey. He's a singer in that choir. And we have Julie Duty, who's Artistic Director of United Sound in Arizona. And Dr. Allison Fromm is the Director of Joyful Noise in New Jersey. Welcome, everyone. And here's what we would like to do. I would like to ask you, before we ask our students questions, to talk a little bit about your organizations, to introduce your ensembles and tell a little bit about what you do and who you are working with. So why don't we start with Leanne?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Leanne Ryan. I am the Artistic Director of the NL Deaf Choir here in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. I'm also a music classroom teacher at BG Cove Elementary School in Portugal Cove, St. Philip's. There, I teach grades kindergarten to grade 4, as well as an adapted music class for special needs students. My journey with the deaf choir was a particularly interesting one because I didn't start off to start a choir. They were going to do an awareness video at the Newfoundland Labrador Association for the Deaf, and to the song "This Is Me" from The Greatest Showman, and they wanted a music consultant to come on to help them maybe connect to the music, maybe they could sign a bit. And when I get started with this group, it kind of took off and created a life of its own. And I make little jokes about our accidental choir, but it was the greatest accident that could have happened to us at that point in time. So I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. How about Julie? You are.
Sure. I am the founder and executive director of United Sound, which is an organization that helps teachers to understand how to include students with disabilities into their instrumental music programs. We do this through a peer mentorship model. So we're taking existing band and orchestra students and giving them all the tools as far as training and curriculum so that they can be excellent teachers to their friends and peers. We started in 2014. We have about 130 individual school chapters in 30 states, which is wonderful. About 8,000 students have participated in the first 6 years, which is a great change. A lot of students, and we have college chapters all the way down to middle school. It's a huge change, but at every place we're only talking about including 10 to 20 new musicians into a program. So it's a small lift in a bunch of places where we can make a significant change. We are highly focused on social change through music, social inclusion through music. So the program is built around obviously playing and performing together, but we really focus on that relationship aspect. And I'm a former band director.
Thank you, Julie. And Allison.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to learn from my colleagues. Joyful Noise is a chorus that my sister and I started together about 20 years ago in New Jersey. My sister was born with a disability. She has epilepsy and intellectual developmental disability. And she loves to sing as much as we all love music. So what I realized 20 years ago, before so many of these programs had been started, was that students in schools sometimes had access to music programs. But once they graduated from school, the focus was to teach them to do their laundry, to get some kind of supported employment, to cook a meal. And there wasn't the opportunity for self-expression that we all need and love. So we started a chorus called Joyful Noise. I had had no music education training, but I had a sister and we drew in about 15 friends. And since then, we've had a couple of hundred people in New Jersey, and we've done collaborations with other choirs across the country, performed at some exciting conferences and with universities at Harvard and Yale and Lehigh, and given people a chance to reach out to the world and become a model for other individuals who might want to start a program. They embraced a mission to inspire in 2008. And there have been many choirs that have started out of this inspiration. I've also worked at Woodlands Foundation in Pittsburgh area, which has beautiful summer camps for people with all sorts of disabilities and given them professional performing experience. So it's been an exciting journey. And I am a graduate of the University of Illinois. Dr. Shoya was on my committee. So I'm home.
Thank you. And Todd, would you please say just a few words about yourself?
Well, my name is Todd Edmonds. I am from Voorhees, New Jersey. I've been involved with Joyful Noise for close to 20 years. Also with the musical group, how I got started in the music, I first started with a group called New Lisbon State School Choir. I used to play the bongos in the musical choir, and then I played the handbells, and I also sang part of the time for our New Lisbon State School Choir. So I was one of their alto voices for their men's choir group. And I've been involved with that. That was over 40-some years ago. I'm 62 years old. I'll be 63 in October. And I'm also involved with another group called the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities. This is a group of staff who are people. There's 33 of us that are individuals who has developmental disabilities, and then we have other people that work with us who are just staff members and parents of adults or children who has intellectual disabilities. And I've been doing it for almost 15 years, and I'm so proud of myself doing that. And I'm just so happy to be in here today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We are, very grateful for you, and I think we are going to learn quite a nice, but a big deal from you and from your experience of being on ensembles or music ensembles. I'm gonna go ahead and give you the first question on the list so we can get going. What are simple things that we can do or say in our classroom or rehearsal space to make it more welcoming for people with special needs? Maybe Julie, you want to take on that first?
Sure. One of the things for our teachers, our music teachers, is that this is really about the music teacher more than it is necessarily about the student with special needs, but that part of their unwelcoming nature stemmed from just a discomfort with themselves. Like, I don't know what to say. I might say the wrong thing. So from the very beginning, we say in this program, you have mentors and musicians. And the word that you're going to use is musicians, and you never have to worry about getting it wrong. And it is amazing, like, how quickly the fear and some of that, distance that you would experience between a teacher and a musician in their classroom just immediately disappears when they know, oh, I can't mess this up, because this is something that as music educators, we often don't get any training, right? No, here's what you're going to do. Here's how it's going to work. This is how you're going to teach the clarinet. You may go to one class. University of Illinois has a better training for students with special needs than almost anywhere as far as an undergraduate program. But for the most part, like, we're just being thrown into the classroom without any tools. So just deciding, oh, you're a musician, I'm glad you're here. If I need a label, right? Otherwise your label is your name. Welcome, John,
Mm-hmm.
But if I need a label, I'm going to call you musicians because that's what you are in my classroom, and
Mm-hmm.
that removes that barrier so quickly. Other things that you can do are just, for me, the biggest one, and the thing I talk to teachers more often than anything else, is just wait time, because it's not a part of our culture, and it's certainly not a part of our teaching culture. And that's something that everybody in the room, not just a disabled student, but everybody in the room can benefit from you adding in some intentional wait time, right? So I'm going to give an instruction, and then I'm going to give you a moment to process what I just said before I expect an immediate response. And every child, that's what, when we talk about barrier removal, benefits everybody in the room, right? Not just a student with a disability. That's something that can immediately make everybody more comfortable, right? So if I need a label, it's a perfectly fine label to use with everybody. And I'm going to add in that intentional processing time. I was taught in my music education curriculum to just be like, voiceover, go, playing, you're not talking, And I think back to my own teaching and think, oh, what a stressful environment that must have been. So it's a natural mistake to make. You almost have to teach yourself, just instruction, pause, next thing. Before I give a second thing, I'm going to give everybody those two things. So those are going to be my two tidbits.
Julie, that's very much how my programs run as well, because going through all of my degrees, it was always, if your students are singing, then they don't have time to talk or fool around, or if they're playing their instrument and their reeds in their mouth, there's no time. But what I found when I was actually put in the situation in the classrooms, that especially with my adapted music students, that they need that space to be themselves, and so for them to even find how deep the music inside of them, especially for my deaf students, they really need it to have that time and that space, because even in deaf culture, there is time and space that is built in. And it was always a joke when I first started with my choir that, well, you're on deaf time now. So, prepare for a 3-hour rehearsal if you have it scheduled for 1. And that was because the time for them to be themselves, and that the space was created within the rehearsals for them. And we call them all musicians, the exact same thing as the great leveler. This is interesting to hear. Thanks, Julie.
That's where I would start too. I think that it has to do with making a welcoming space, has to do with being compassionate with yourself, mm-hmm. and having a mindset that we will all learn something from this endeavor. I wonder how having this person in my classroom, in my rehearsal, will enrich the music making experience for all of us. Mm-hmm. And yes, I will make mistakes. Maybe we can avoid certain mistakes by focusing first on the person's name and calling them a musician, or calling them a singer, or calling them a student, and not making those distinctions. But we will make mistakes, and it's okay. That's how all of us teach. That's how all of us learn. And so I think there are certain things that you can prepare in your space. One is preparing the space itself. Mm-hmm. The old Montessori philosophy of the prepared environment. If you know you're going to have somebody coming in a motorized wheelchair, then walk into your space and imagine that you were driving that motorized wheelchair. Can you clear a path, mm-hmm. for that person? If there's an IEP, IHP 504 plan, read it. But I would say that the most important thing is to engage with the individuals themselves by name, by John. Sometimes you get a lot of information from parents, from caregivers, from special ed teachers, and you want to take in that information, but I think it's a person first approach. These are human beings first, they're musicians second, and their disabilities only come into play when you need to accommodate those disabilities in order to empower the musician and the human being. So that trying to avoid thinking of a person with a label as a person with a disability. Here is Todd. Here is Andrea. Welcome, join us.
Thank you, folks. These are really wonderful answers. And the next question is somewhat similar, but I think asks you to get a little more specific into rehearsal techniques and maybe how you rehearse in an environment with students with special needs. And are there specific challenges and ways you've learned to work around those challenges in those rehearsals? Leanne, do you want to start?
Sure. I'll start. And this question, I'm going to direct it to my deaf choir because that's very much a different space than my adaptive music classes. And I didn't start off this journey to start a deaf choir. I actually had a student in a kindergarten class who was deaf. So I learned as much as I could because I knew that, the resources were limited. He was going to be thrown in with 30 kids in my classroom, and I didn't want him to be left behind. And so I had to relearn, well, there is actually musical experiences for people who are deaf. Just because they can't hear the music doesn't mean they can't feel it. But even things in my classroom, such as if there's a window behind you, it's hard to read your lips. Or what if there is, some kind of a physical barrier, or if you're all around a circle and one person steps up, you always have to be aware of who is not being included right now. It's not so much who is included, but who is not getting everything I need them to get right now. So I learned basic ASL, and that evolved into a full choir. But I found it really important that to recognize myself that I was a learner. Every single day I was a learner. And I didn't grow up with deaf people. There was a school for the deaf, but it was on the other side of the island. So there were no deaf people in my life growing up. And as long as I took the lead from them, then I was able to kind of make it for them. Does that make sense to you? Mm-hmm. So physical challenges when you're dealing with people that are deaf or hard of hearing are utmost important to me, because if they can't see you, they can't hear you.
Julie, do you want to add anything to that about instrumental rehearsals?
It's funny, Leanne, I was thinking about a student that I had when I was still teaching, and she was deaf, and she played saxophone in our band program, and I had her for 2 years. And I learned a lot from her about making a change that would benefit her, that would reverberate throughout. We didn't have any windows in our classrooms, but I wear a lot of makeup now compared to what I was wearing 15 years ago when I was teaching. So not a ton. And she said to me one day, "Oh, I could really read your lips better if you would wear lipstick." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna have to go buy some of that." So I bought this really dark red lipstick, thinking like, all right, I'm gonna lean into this. And suddenly everybody in the room could hear me better, right? Because we learned this from wearing masks, right? We are all reading lips all the time, a little bit. We're associating what we heard with also what we saw. And so then that just became like and I must have looked ridiculous because I didn't have any other makeup on except for this like super dark lipstick, but like that was part of my teaching uniform was to do that. The other thing that I would say is that United Sound is a reverse inclusion environment. So it is a music for students with special needs with peer mentors added in. not your general education band in the other direction. But the concept works either direction. And that having somebody to help you who knows that their job is to help you and that they're allowed to talk and, you know, look off task and be your buddy. And I'm also going to say having more than one person who has that, you know, opportunity and responsibility. Number one, when you have more than one peer mentor, it takes some of the pressure off of the peer mentor, so that I don't, as one person, I don't always have all the answers. But just having somebody next to you to repeat an instruction, to point at your music, to say, oh, we're right here, you know, to just be that little added help. And it makes all three, you know, it makes everybody feel good, right? And it feels good to help, feels good to get the help, you know. And so that strategic placing in your instrumental classroom of, okay, here's somebody who might need some help. And sometimes that help can be behavioral, right? Not like some of your students with disabilities, what you actually see in an instrumental classroom looks like behavior, right? Because when we're falling behind, then our fear kicks in, and so I'm going to misbehave, and then you won't know that I'm falling behind, and I've got this behavior for whatever reason, you know, whatever that is happening often looks like bad behavior. And so if you have that support and that friendship, and get rid of some of those other problems that weren't really problems at all, they were just distractions. So your students are your best, absolutely your best ally at all times, whether you're doing something that's specific like United Sound or just running a regular rehearsal.
That's really helpful. And I wonder if we could loop Todd in right now. Todd, I understand you played percussion in middle school band. Could you talk about that experience a little bit, please?
That was an interesting time for me because I was only about 14 years old when I first learned how to play the bongos. And then one of my music teacher, Mr. Paul Riley, was my music teacher for that, taught me how to play the bongos with both hands and different beats at the different times. And then I also had Mrs. Melton, who was my choir music teacher. And that was an interesting time too, because we had some of the guys who was in my group were not only blind, but was also deaf. And it was hard for them to hear. And some of them had individual like vision impaired and stuff, but we all harmonized together as one voice. And that was like my mom's dream for me. And I got to actually wearing a, when we first performed, we wore like real professional looking choir, like choir gowns and all. And that was the first time I ever wore a choir gown. And then for me doing that, and then my other music teacher, Mr. Brown, was taught me how to do the handbells, and that was really a neat experience. So I have been doing choiring for quite a while, and then I had Mr. Gary Berry for my music to work on my musical singing. So I had a lot of people helping me. This is through another school called Repertoire Johnstone, but it's no longer in service. It's been they closed in 1990, and I was in Lisbon since 73 to 74, early 72 to 74, and then from 74 to 76, on my mom's birthday, that's when I finally came home from Johnstone, and then I lived on my own.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear about your experiences and how important music is. It's great.
Yeah, thank you.
I love hearing these specific stories about how we have a student who inspires us to create a new technique. I think that sometimes it's the spontaneous that is the most powerful. The lipstick, the windows, so if we have a blind student, sometimes we'll create a buddy system and somebody will tap on that person's shoulder. Or perhaps in a certain situation, you might want that person up front because they can hear your breathing. I also love the idea of giving space and giving time to process instructions. Sometimes we all come into rehearsals with so many different things on our minds. And at times when the energy is just going in a zillion directions at once, a technique might be close your eyes and imagine something. Imagine that flagpole that if you're preparing to sing the national anthem for a football team, can you stand tall like that flagpole? Sometimes that will settle the energy. One technique is to have people sing in a whisper. Just again, to focus, to be able to hear. Sometimes, we'll hold up a hand by an ear so that everybody can listen. And the techniques can apply to everyone, not just your people with disabilities, the whole universal design for learning approach, that whatever accommodations you make to simplify and streamline and clarify your instructions probably benefit everybody in the room. Sometimes you create your own teaching materials, whether that be our students who can't really read a musical score, not a full musical score anyway. So we'll create lyric sheets, we'll put line numbers on them. We might say, okay, we want to start at line 5, cream-colored ponies, and then they know where to go. Memory can sometimes be an issue if people are not reading a score. So if you can choose repertoire that has a lot of repetition, oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day, I've got a wonderful feeling. The cadence of that will help people learn. Assigning buddies and also offering short solos. Sometimes, everybody loves a solo. Right? And then the rest of the group has a little bit less to learn and they can be proud of and cheer the person who has a solo. Processing music in shorter chunks. Sometimes assigning people only a portion of something to do. We had singers who sang in Eric Whitaker's Virtual Choir 6 this summer with 17,000 other singers from around the world. And we got wonderful accommodations from Eric Whitaker's team in that not everybody recorded the whole piece. A few singers did, and then a few singers recorded a phrase or two. And they created materials that helped people learn the music. So it really comes out of tuning in to the individual in front of you and what would help, and sometimes even asking them, what would help make this easier for you? And not feeling like you have to be the expert all the time. That person is the expert in what's going on in their mind and their body. We are not.
Thank you. And that actually, Allison, what you were saying leads me to the next question. I'm going to skip one. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I should skip one and then let's just talk a little bit about repertoire for a deaf choir. And Leanne, somebody asked this question, and I must quickly insert this in here that I give my conductors every Friday, first Friday of the month in the semester, we talk about articles, blogs, whatever they run into, and they bring something into the class and share, like a show and tell. Mm-hmm. And one of my students, show and tell was your choir. And that's how we got to know the deaf choir. Diamond. Mm-hmm. Diamond brought in and she said, we all have to look at this. This is fascinating. It's, I think, fascinating because being deaf and music is something which which is very impulsive, like very sensory, you know. That's a very fascinating discovery, or at least it was for us, that there is a choir. So choose repertoire. How do you work with people who actually can't hear what they are doing?
Right. So if I had have been asked this question 4 years ago, I wouldn't have a clue how to respond to it. But music, I've learned throughout this, it's a feeling, it's something you feel in your being, and it's a part of a community. And it doesn't matter if you can't hear the song, you can still feel the song and make the song. So in our rehearsals, I mean, there's a lot of touch. Let's touch the speakers, you know, and feel the vibrations. And all of those senses are heightened, whereas they're not in me. So I can feel the speaker and it might feel the same, but if, you know, my coursers, when they feel a speaker, they're feeling the music. And so when I have to pick out the repertoire for them, it's a different procedure, because for us, if I don't have live singers, then we have to use the recordings. And one of the big things about the recordings is you've got to get the rights from every single person who was involved in that. So one of the songs we did, and this is, you know, really our deaf anthem, was This Is Me from The Greatest Showman. I think there were 36 writers maybe on that song. So having to get on the phone to get permission from every single one of those to have it displayed in a recording, you know, is quite a lot of work for one song. So what we've been doing a lot, we've been asked to be guest choristers many times. And so the rep is handed to us. But recently we're looking to our community, because Newfoundland and Labrador, we are a culture that sings. That's one of our slogans, our culture sings. And for the longest time, the deaf community was not even included or even consideration in that, because how do you experience music if you can't hear it? And it was only through my choir that I realized that the music is about so much more than what you're hearing. It's so much more. There's so much more when it comes to a community and all of those things. And so for picking repertoire for us, it's kind of the opposite. It depends on if I'm using my children, where I would use a lot of repetition and things like that, because they're just learning the language as well, because there's not a deaf school here. So there is a language delay for all of my younger choristers. But for the older choristers, now that I'm part of the deaf community, I realize the beauty and the song that is in sign language. We like to pick rep that's inspiring, uplifting. Sometimes, you know, it's painfully uplifting, but it's good for us when you're talking in ASL, or when you're signing in ASL. You can have 10 signs for one thing. I mean, I could have a tree. This is the sign for tree, but is the tree in the wind? You know, is the rain coming down? And when you pick the rep, you want to pick the stories that you can make the most interesting, the most beautiful, and that hearing people can hear your song, even though there's no sound. So they can hear with their eyes. Sorry, my deaf people hear with their eyes, but the hearing people, when they see this, you can feel that music in your heart and in your soul, even if you didn't realize. I didn't realize going into this how much of an impact that it was going to have to me, and how much it was going to change how I saw music. And I thought, you know, I was pretty good. I knew what was happening, but until I started in with my deaf choir, I didn't realize that third dimension that was there, right? And that's the feeling of the music. And I can't speak from a deaf perspective, but from what they tell me, it's a whole new world that has been opened up, a whole new world, right? Something that was never accessible that is now accessible. And I would encourage anybody to get involved with their deaf communities and reach out to their deaf associations if this is something they were interested in, because the amount of satisfaction you get from bringing music to people who music was never part of their life. And I mean, I've got 70-year-olds in my choir. It is the most beautiful and meaningful thing. It has been my favorite passion project of my career to date. The rep is hard, but it's getting easier as we're growing as our own choral organization. Even finding the musicians in our city who are willing to say, take my songs, sign my songs, and you don't need to pay us royalties, is a game changer for us right now. And Newfoundland and Labrador is full of incredible, incredible musicians. So we've got a lot.
It's really exciting. I think the next question, I'm going to combine two of them, and they're kind of for you, Julie. But if others of you want to chime in, feel free. The sixth question is, has there been progress in instruments being reconfigured for people with physical disabilities? And if so, are there programs and resources available to obtain these for use in the classroom? And the next question is, how can we change the culture of band to be more inclusive to exceptional individuals? What small and realistic changes can music educators make to their curriculum? I kind of feel like the sixth question might be part of the answer to 7, but of course, Julie, this is really your area, so share.
Oh, it's funny, I was asked this question yesterday also. I'm going to share an unpopular opinion. Hopefully you won't kick me out of the Zoom. I really struggle with the ableism of making decisions for other people. And in that, on the rare time as an instrumental teacher, when you have a student with a disability, we just immediately say, here's your drum, right? Oh, you belong in the percussion section. We'll put a pad on the drum so we can't hear what you're doing. Is the way that it often goes, all the way to the point where we are of welcome to the band, and teachers and students themselves and parents will come in and say, oh, well, he can only play the drums. Oh, I can only play the drums. And we treat it like a very traditional beginning band situation where we go, oh, well, we don't have any of those today, but here's everything else. What would you like to try? And what we have found, with all of these thousands of children now processing through the program, is that everybody can there's not a reason that we don't hand out clarinets and trumpets and everything else to students with disabilities, other than our own assumptions or our own lack of ability to create a ramp up to the beginning of that thing. And this isn't to say that some individuals really wouldn't benefit, especially people with physical limitations obviously benefit. But this person that I was speaking to, actually from the University of Illinois, he's highly involved in digital music. And he said, well, what can we do? And I said, if it's a digital music ensemble, then absolutely. But I don't want to sit in an orchestra with an iPad, unless that's the only way I can be in the orchestra, right? Unless that is what is completely appropriate for me. But I think that if I can play the violin in some way that is modified for me, I'd like to play the violin. There are instrument manufacturers that Conselmer and Eastman, I know, will actively modify the instrument, like the instrument for you. And then just about every local music store that has an instrument repair shop will do the same thing. So, you need a stand to hold it up. You need, whatever the modification is, I think we have a really welcoming community that's excited to do that. But I struggle with we're going to make this accommodation for you because we pre-decided that you can't. Remind me what the second question was. And this is not to discredit, all of the wonderful, amazing technological advances that we, have made. I visited in New York City and it was an adaptive music class, and they were using Scoogs, I think. It was amazing and awesome, but everybody in the room was using Scoogs, so it was appropriate to use a Skoog in that environment. It's that where, you're different. We need to do something different for you, right? That's the thing. It just is heartbreaking for me let's start with what everybody else is doing and then make accommodations as needed so that we can meet you where you are instead of deciding for you. Okay, Beth, what was the second question?
Well, I apologize. That kind of is answering the second question about how to make the band more inclusive. And, it's interesting to me that as a band person that, band is being called out here because I think we need to make orchestra and choir more inclusive as well. I think your approach is sort of answering that. But are there other things that you'd like to add about being more inclusive in the large ensemble?
and I think the key word right there is large ensembles are where we really struggle, right? Because as a teacher, I'll go to that IEP meeting and then I'll leave, and now I've got this giant list of things that I am legally required to do, right? And I am feeling buried, right? When I was teaching, I worked so hard to recruit, but it meant that, and I was good at it. So my 7th grade band had 92 children in it and 3 children with autism. Well, I really can't give anybody my whole attention. You know? So here's where we start to struggle. And then I look at this list of things I have to do for you as an individual and go, but I see 320 kids every single day. You know, how am I supposed to do this? And what I would say is that, and Allison mentioned this just a moment ago, is to take that, I just want to like change all of music education to barrier removal. And to take that, what is good for the one, and say, instead of doing this for the one, what can I do to make this good for everyone? Because there are so many people without a piece of paper that say they need it who absolutely benefit from that, right? So students with, these are broad swaths, students with intellectual developmental disabilities often are just really, process is important to them, right? We need to do exactly the same thing in exactly the same order. And if you change things up, I'm gonna feel really uncomfortable with that, yes? But as a music teacher, like I don't wanna be boxed into doing exactly the same thing for everyone. So I had on one of the IEPs that I needed to, the day before, give him a piece of paper that said, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. So that he, you know, and I was like, oh, this is really overwhelming for me. But I could just do that for everyone, right? I can have on the board, here's today, here's tomorrow. And then tomorrow just moves over, I don't have to redo it. Here's tomorrow, here's tomorrow. And everybody would know what was coming, right? Now, are there times when you'll have to make changes and, you know, oh, this isn't going well, we're gonna need to scooch over here, yes. And this is where the buddy system can come into play and, you know, have these other things. The other thing, I'm going to pull from Alice Hamill and Ryan Harrigan's books here, but that the concept of modification in terms of size, pacing, color, and modality. Just asking yourself, okay, what can I do with these 4 things to modify what I'm doing? And I can do that for everybody. Pacing is as easy as the wait time that we've already talked about a whole bunch, right? Pacing can also be mitigated by that buddy that's sitting next to you who can repeat the instruction that might have been missed, right? Who can point at where we are in the music. I love the idea of numbering the lines because I mean, I know for myself, I sit in rehearsals and they're like, you know, 126, and you're like, what is that done? And then go, and you've already started. You don't even have your instrument up, you know, all of this stuff, because as the conductor, you know, you were already thinking about where you wanted to go before we ever stopped playing, but all the rest of us are still on playing. You know, we were still in that other moment, we were in the forward moment. So being able to give a line and then a measure number, I mean, what a great idea, especially for, you know, young bands, because they have a heck of a time finding measure numbers. That is awesome. But size, a lot of students, what we have found, that apparently the major barrier to playing instrumental music is tracking it. We sit really far away from our music band, and the music is like, right? And it's on these 5 lines, and you have to try to find it, and then your eyes have to be able to drive along and find where you are. And this is for every student, but sometimes something as easy as just making the music bigger, right? And in part because like nobody wants to be the kid with their music star, and it's right. I don't want to be singled out, but it's also difficult to track when it's too close, right? So just making it bigger can make a difference. I can show you. Do I have the ability to share my screen?
I can give you the power.
I promise I will stop talking at the end of this last thing. Sorry. I'm just gonna share my whole desktop here. So So this is the font that we use in United Sound. Can you guys see it okay? And so to begin with, we start with cake, donut, soup, and so we've got some size here, right? This is, it changes size and pacing. You can also see that there's colors. Color is the most magical tool of all time for learning anything, right? So assign a color to every note. You will eventually be able to eliminate them, but and every notation program can do that. But this, right, you can see that the half note is twice as big as the quarter note. So it's longer because it's longer. Rhythm reading is such an abstract skill. I mean, amazingly abstract, right? This dot that's not filled in is different than this dot that is filled in. Like, come on, you guys. And I really, I mean, I was a freshman in college sitting in a piano class and looking at music, you know, multiple lines of music vertically and went, oh. And here I am on a full ride music scholarship. And, and I didn't have a complete understanding of how rhythms worked until I was 18 years old, right? This is an indicator that just music is difficult for all of us, but so making it longer because it's longer. I mean, think about, especially for percussionists who have no sustained pitch, like that half note is a difficult thing to really process. We move from here to, you know, still spatial, but looks more like a regular note. We can take the letter names on and off. You can take all the letter names on and off all of these to finally hear where we're reading regular music. This is a font that's free that works with all the music notation software. So you just go to unitedsound.org/font and you can download it for free. But just being able to take those size, pacing, color, modality and say, what can I do? How do I make this work? And how do I make this work better for everybody is maybe what I would say for instrumental music. And then you don't feel like you're drowning in individual modifications. You're just fixing it for everybody and you don't have to feel so overwhelmed. And there will always, of course, still be things that you have to do for individuals and you should be glad to do them. But, you know, serve the many as much as you can and decrease your workload and let your other students help you.
Thank you. It's so, so good to hear all this. And I, as I mentioned earlier, I have to run off to class. I want to thank you all for being here. What I'm taking away from what you're all saying is flexibility and creativity, and all of what you're saying is just would make me, anyone, a better teacher. And that's really lovely. So thank you for that. And carry on. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Beth. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. I guess I need to combine some of these questions which are at the end. Maybe if you could give us a challenge and a reward in your work, what you do. What was a challenge you remember that still stays with you or staying with you? How did you come over that challenge, and maybe a reward of your work, what you do?
Well, I can start with this one. My challenge was when I was brought in as a music consultant, I didn't speak the same language as any of my choristers. So they were all signing and I didn't have a clue what was going on. And I'm used to being the director in the room. So everybody's eyes are to me for, you know, what do we do next? How is this going to happen? And I had to completely flip the way that I was going to do it. And everything came from the deaf community first, so that like, even if we're looking at how are we going to sign these words, everything came from the deaf community. Then I integrated it with the music. And it was so challenging because even everybody, you know, you speak with a different accent. I have a different accent than all of you right now because I'm in Newfoundland, Canada, but people sign with different accents as well. And that can be regional or it can be, you know, generational. And trying to fit myself in there without overstepping was my greatest challenge, because I'm used to being the expert in the room. And when I walked in this room, I was not the expert. I was the bottom of the totem pole. And I really had to learn, first of all, how to exist in a different community, because the deaf community is very different from the hearing community. And I had to, you know, learn this is their culture and this is what's acceptable and this is what's not. And this is what, you know, being an artist is. And this is what ableism is, and all the things that I thought a little bit about, but I didn't take it to that further step where these people can't even hear the music, you know. So how do we create musicians when you can't hear the music? And that challenge ended up being a lot easier than I thought it would be. You know, those first couple of weeks were really challenging for me, but then they accepted me because they knew I was there for them. I wasn't there for the music. I wasn't there for the accolades. I was there to help a whole community experience something new. And it became the most rewarding thing in my life, because now I have a whole community that I was never a part of before. And, you know, it's even changed, it's changed my teaching in my schools. It's changed my family even, because, you know, my daughter was so interested and she was meeting all these people and she was learning these cool signs, and, you know, they would come knock on the door for Halloween and the children were signing to me and she didn't know what was going on. And she's very involved in music and she does musical theater. She's in a few choirs, you know, she plays trumpet and violin and piano. But she was so intrigued by this that I actually put her in another choir, and the choir was for neurodiverse children. And so she went in as a mentor, but not really, because it was so good for her. It's like what's good for the one is good for the many. And so she's sitting in a choir with children with autism, trying to help keep them on track. But this has become the most fulfilling thing in her 10-year-old life. And just seeing how that can spread, you know. So what was once a challenge has become a reward, and it's become a reward that other people are now a part of, and it's changing how they operate in their musical worlds. And to me, that is just one of the most magical things that can happen, because that's what music is. It's for everybody. And if we can find ways to make that happen, it makes the entire world a more beautiful and more inclusive place.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Allison?
So I think that one of the ways that we solve some of the challenges of music learning and also of acceptance maybe by making connections with composers, making connections with other choirs, bringing people together. And part of what this does is it does create a buddy system. But if you have to go out and perform at Radio City Music Hall, you need to teach them something about how to make your space accessible. Work in the moment to overcome the obstacles, to release the barriers. The performing with the choirs at Yale and Harvard, I think, was a very reciprocal experience. We all had to deal with wheelchair lifts that don't work, and but just bringing people together, having music composed specifically for you and for your ensemble, arranging music on your own is another technique. Working with Eric Whitaker's team this summer really was a very powerful experience, because they came to us and they said, we want to make this more open to people around the world who have various challenges. What would you advise? And I realized I didn't know what to advise, but the one way we could do this was to try it. Mm-hmm. What do we need? They had guide tracks, they had conductor videos, and I realized that for our singers, it would help almost to make a karaoke track. Yes, keep Eric Whitaker's beautiful conducting and have the lyrics. And they had provided music tracks that had individual voice parts highlighted. Say the alto part was twice as loud as the other parts. But what I realized for our singers was that it was a little bit too much input. So could they create a video that had just their part and the piano part without the other parts? Could they make sure that the lyrics moved at the exact same time as that alto part, not the tenor part where people would get confused? And so we had 24 singers who participated in this choir. And may I turn this to Todd and ask him about what the experience, what the reward was of singing Sing Gently this summer?
This summer, especially for singing for Eric Whitaker, was something I will never forget, because I had lost several members of my family just this past couple of years ago. I lost my older brother, and then I lost my mom, and I lost my uncles. I had lost so many people. Like in 1 year, I lost like 8 or 9 people in 1 year, and it was like they're all up in heaven. And I know we were singing to them, and I'm always like, I'm like very proud of myself for singing. And I thank also Nick Page for writing a song for us. You Have a Heart, and that was when we learned the hand motions from that song, and I got to learn how to I learned all the middle parts of the voice, the song of it, and it really taught me a lot of stuff about myself that I didn't even know that I could do. And that's one great thing about it. It gave me a challenge. And the singing at Radio City Music Hall, that was a challenge and a half, and everybody congratulated us after we were all done. So I got a lot of accomplishments from that. And I asked my girlfriend, me and my girlfriend have been together for a long time, but I asked her to join us for trying out for the choir, and she tried out for the choir, and they had asked her to join us, and I'm happy that she did join us for the Joyful Noise, that she is one of our choir members.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Julie?
Before I answer the question, I do want to correct or clarify something I said earlier when we were talking about instruments. And I said, you know, we had students walk in and we say, here's your drum. With an authentic opportunity to choose, we end up with about 25% of our participants play percussion, because hitting things is awesome. It's why there are drummers in this world. So I'm not saying that you know, somebody with a disability should not play percussion. They just should play percussion if you know, that's the thing that will light their world on fire.
I understand.
So, I didn't want to, you know, become the percussion hater. You know, it's interesting because the challenge has changed. At the beginning, the challenge was the music teachers, you know, from like, I don't know how to do that. You know? But I wear my, I have a difficulty with so many things, but one of them is not what I am. I'm perfectly fine with saying I don't know, and telling what I don't know. And so doing that over and over and over and over again, saying, oh, I don't know, let's ask the person who does, you know, and never claiming that some false knowledge, right? Or having any like worry about the fact that I didn't know something, has kind of reverberated into our music teachers of, oh, I don't know how to do this, I'm going to ask someone. And as teachers, we're supposed to be the content expert on everything. So kind of getting rid of that fear has just made the teachers just roll, the music teachers. Our biggest challenge now, and I say this from the place of the most love and respect, are the special education teachers and the special education parents. And not from their own fault, right? We've primarily focused on secondary high school students, and we're moving into this adults, college age, and beyond. And you know, if you have heard no and can't, and the door is locked for 16 or 17 or 18 or 20 years, I mean, you just get tired of beating on it. So when somebody comes along and they're like, hey, come in, and you know, you're like, yeah. A special education teacher with any years under their belt has heard it all and seen it all, and things look good, and they never are, you know, especially where peer mentors are involved, because the peer mentors stop showing up, right? Like my students are not your service project. And I agree, you know, but we kind of have to advocate of well, you know, you don't know a band kid, like they don't leave until we lock the door at 6 o'clock. You know, they're already here. We might as well give them something to do. You know, like there's something different about a music kid. And if you're not involved with music kids, you don't know that, but they're different, right? We are different because we are music. We are, you know, it's not, you know, jump how high. It's like, I was already jumping. I anticipated, you know, like, and as you start to build those relationships, those people who are not familiar with musicians go, oh, okay, I see. You know, but we have just so much fear of the unknown, fear of peer mentors, fear of music. If you're not a musician, you know, it's super easy to go, I can't play the violin. What makes you think my child could? You know, because it seems like a foreign language. It seems like something that is really super difficult. So we are working really hard on that advocacy piece on the other side of, well, can we just try? Will you just, you know, try? And of course, I mean, the reward is just every time that this blossoms. You know, and I play in a band still, and have lots of musical opportunities for myself. But like the thing that I miss the most from this COVID is standing backstage and taking awful pictures of the back of people's heads that I'll never use or post, because I'm just so excited for this experience that someone else is having, you know, standing back there with other people who are, you know, equally unconnected and that we're not performing, and just, you know, just being in that moment of, we're doing this all together. And there is no difference between you and me. We're all playing a modified part of some kind, right? The flutes and the tubas are not playing the same thing. Everybody's being met where they are. Everybody feels good that we're making music together for someone. And so I like, that's the reward, is being able to make music together. And the thing that we're all missing so much right now. But
say that, you know,
it'll come, we're on the way.
Yeah, no matter what situation you are in, we are just all missing making music together. We need to wrap this up. However, I'd like to give you 10 seconds before we leave, just to say what is, and what I take away from today or this morning was, you did not go into this knowing everything. You did not go in working with people with special needs by knowing everything about it, and then just, you know, you were the expert. You've learned along the way. What would you say to a 22-year-old college student about to go out to the world? What is your 10-second wisdom you would like them to have? And that's how we're gonna close.
I'll go first.
Okay.
There are so many people in the world, and especially if you're in a school system, that will be so excited to help you. All you have to do is ask the questions. I mean, thrilled to help you.
Thank you.
And I'll just add on that, one of the most important relationships is to make with your peers, with your colleagues, because they will come out of the woodworks when you don't even expect them to. And really, don't be afraid if people say no and you can't do it, because I was once told there are no problems, only situations. And when you really look at that, you can find a way around anything. You really can. There are solutions to everything. It might not look how you thought it was going to look, but they are there. And I can't speak highly enough about the mentorship and programs that we do that, because not only, you know, are the students who are being mentored learning so much, but the students who are mentoring, they are learning so much every single time. And, you know, maybe they don't have somebody with exceptionalities in their family, right? Or maybe they don't have someone with exceptionalities on their soccer team, but when they go to have these experiences, that opens up their mind and their hearts to a whole different world, and a place that they're going to want to be, whether you know it or not.
Awesome. Thank you. And Allison?
I would say just have an open heart. Trust yourself. Don't expect limits. It's a little bit like what Julie was saying about the special education teachers. Don't assume that somebody can't. expect that there will be surprises and rewards. Just jump in and trust yourself.
Well, thank you so much, all of you, Todd, Julie, Allison.
Just put your best foot forward. Just try to do it. Just try to put your best foot forward and do the best that you can do. I'm proud to say I've been a Special Olympian for over 50 years, and I do the best that I can do. And that's all I can do. I love to do whatever I can do. If I can't do it, I'll try.
What a beautiful message. And our hearts are beating together from Canada through Arizona, through New Jersey, everywhere in Illinois. So much for being part of our Encore series at the University of Illinois. I know our students are going to be thrilled hearing everything you were saying today, and I'm just forever grateful.
Thank you for having us.
We are just better by knowing you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.